Hello and welcome back to Rule the Waves 3, one of my absolute favorite games of all time. Probably one of the best strategy games I've ever been fortunate enough to play. Last time we talked about this triangle, which was strategy layer, the turn-based stuff, the ship designer, and we have the actual battles. So this is the strategy layer, the interface for that. The design ship interface looks a bit like this. And the battles I cannot yet show you because, well, there aren't any battles to be fought yet, so we'll get to that. But immediately you notice one of my one of the negative things, one of the things that makes this game not perfect, but I mean, we could maybe get there. It's the interface. It looks like a spreadsheet. It's an Excel workbook, basically. You even have various tabs on top of this, or should I call them sheets? Then you have the information presented here. Very little visual. You have this picture of a boat that does nothing. You have your flag, the date. You have a tension meter and some buttons here. You have the turn buttons here, and you have a bunch of interactive buttons here. So you can see there is a sort of sense to it. This is your workbook over here, and then you have some macro buttons, and you have some visual presentation. So people who love Rule the Waves 2 and 3, they jokingly refer to it as a sort of a spreadsheet game, and they're not wrong. But the point is that the game makes every effort to present information to you in a very concise manner without the need for sort of clicking and visuals. That said, I was kind of disappointed with Rule the Waves 3 because they did zero effort went into upgrading the user face, and I don't remember when Rule the Waves arrived, quite a few years ago now. So that is something of a... Oh, I should maximize the screen. I just loaded up here. But be that as it may, if you want to play this extremely good strategy game, you just have to get over the user interface, and I will try to make it easier for you. First of all, these tabs on top here, they are, in my opinion, sorted in order of descending importance. So the world map, which looks like this, it's not beautiful, but again, it contains a lot of info. We will look at the map in detail later, but you have the map, you have your ships in service, that's your fleet basically. Those ships exist, and these ships are being built, so they are in dock, being built. Then you have ships that aren't ships, aka underwater ships, submarines. Submarines don't exist in its January 1819. No one has made a viable submarine yet. Yes, they have experimented with it and sort of thinking about it, but there are no usable operational submarines yet. Then you have coastal fortifications. Those are guns that are on land. They play a role. Not an important role, but they are there. You can build fortifications, and they have an effect on gameplay, both tactical and strategic, but not on shipbuilding. Yeah, no. So, but that's a fairly simple thing. But again, in order of descending, and this is the odd man out, sunk ships that are sunk or scrapped. That is not important, really. It could be over to the right here, I suppose, all the way to the right, I think. Should be right of officers, then my theory that descending order of importance, yeah. But anyway, area overview, it basically is the map minus the map presented as a spreadsheet, so you can quickly sort of see the main sea zones. So here you see all the sea zones, and then you see some statistics associated with them. Now, this isn't super important yet because most of these columns aren't even filled out yet, because they are only relevant for when there is a war. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, you can see that version number here. This is currently in the beta stage. I think that's fine. Then you have base overview. Sort of spins further on the area overview, but you can see that each what is basically an area. And these are the sub areas, and then there are the actual bases, ports, whatever I should call them, listed under here. So it's sort of a tree structure. And then you have your officers and officers command areas, fleets, squadrons. Yeah, you get the idea. We can look at each in turn, but those are your tabs, or should I say worksheets. So you will be clicking between these three quite a lot, especially these two, but you will also be using the other ones, but to a lesser extent. So, before we deep dive into other aspects, let's continue to look at the interface here. Well, the map isn't super interesting, but you can sort of hover over here, and then you can see I have Germany, and I'm using save slot 4 because I have copied my game over there, and I've decided to use that as my main save, and I will have a bit of a backup, I suppose, or something as well, in case there are technical difficulties, but that's behind the hood. So yeah, and it also says tech research 80%, super large, but it doesn't really list any of the other options. I'm not sure how useful that is. You can always click that to bring up the almanac, which you also find here. Only difference is that you jump directly into Germany. Yeah. Prestige. Yeah. This section has sort of a summary of the key numeric values of the game. What turn it is, how much money you have, how much money you are either putting in the bank or withdrawing. Lots of stuff. Then you have the button section here. Buttons that do stuff. You can't build subs yet, so that's grayed out. Many of these things can be accessed from some of these tabs as well, so it's just not one place you can do a specific thing. Here you obviously save the game. Here you can copy the game to one of the other slots. So if I hit this copy game button, it will automatically suggest slot 2. I'm not sure why, but I could make it 8, for example. Not gonna do that, but I mean, if you're thinking, okay, I'm at a good place now, I want to save or I want to backup, but now I want to be super aggressive and pick a fight with the UK, and everything goes to shit, and then you can sort of load your other save and continue with that one. So that's pretty handy without needing to copy paste in Explorer, which you had to do in Ruler Waves too. Don't click the resign button unless you are done with the campaign. Then you get sort of a summary, or well, the campaign ends and you cannot load that game anymore. So that gets very weird. I was pretty sure the first time I played Ruler Waves 2 that was the exit button, but no, it's not the exit button. So don't use it as an exit button. Just hit the cross, but we're not going to exit the game now. Then you have the political diagram here, which also contains, this is your tension, how tense the political situation between nations are. And these are my opponents, my 8 opponents. So China didn't make the cut. It's not super high, but I mean, it's really not super peaceful. 0 is down here. And once you get above this line here, you are basically in trouble. Then war is likely, not guaranteed, but very likely to start very soon. You take a month or 2, or maybe tensions will drop again. Now, you might say that unless you are ready and want a war, you don't want tension, but that is not true. If you manage your tensions down through events and otherwise, the governing body of your nation is going to say, nah, low tensions, we're taking away your money. You don't need a big fleet. There is no tension. No one's attacking us. We're all friends here. We're allies and buddies, and everything is 0. So let's spend the money on roads and hospitals and corrupt villas for our officials and politicians, something like that. But you don't get any money. So you want this brinkmanship thing, where you want to have tension not as high as possible, but you definitely want to see some yellow bars up here. Then you won't get those with taking away your funding events, which are super annoying. So it's a balance. And sometimes the game just throws a wrench into your plans, and suddenly France decides that you're the biggest bastard of all times, and you've been sort of hovering on a pleasant 9 here for quite some time, and suddenly boom, 13 and red and war, and Britain joins in because you didn't notice they had an alliance, and your life is ruined forever. I usually think it's better to click this new button from Ruler Waves 3, All Relations, and then you get it served as a sort of matrix here. You can see the color codings, because it's not just you that have relations. Every nation has a relation to every other nation, so there's a matrix. And to make this even more visible, you can just hit the show values here. I always do that. I think that should be the default, but now you're but it stays that way until you go out of the game and load up again. Yeah, not a big deal, but okay. So everybody's a little bit tense. I mean, France is tense with you, but almost as tense with Japan and Britain and Austria-Hungary and so forth. The highest tension is 5, but once it gets into the 10-ish, 9, 10-ish, there could be war, but sometimes strange things happen, so you cannot always manage your tension. But more on that later. But that is a very important aspect of the game. X here and the red means war, and A and white means that those nations have an alliance. You can still have tension with your alliance partners, but yeah, this 2 means that you have 2 unrest. You can see the unrest level down here as well. We can get back to basically if that goes up to 10, then there is a chance that there will be a revolution, and we could turn communist, or we could become fascist, or yeah, not sure. Not typically a fan of communism, not typically a fan of fascism either, so yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm not even sure Germany in this game can become communist. I haven't tried that. I have tried becoming a fascist, that happened, but yeah, we'll see where we end up. You also have this Intel section. You have something called Intel reports, but it's nothing there yet. You have the almanac, which is a summary of every country. And here you can see your naval budget and so forth. And let's take a moment to appreciate this information, because when we compare our budget to the others here, we can just immediately see that we are not in the top tier. The top tier is Britain. There is only one S tier here, and it's Britain. And then the A tier, that's France, Italy, and Russia. They have a decent budget, hovering around the 200,000 mark, or I like to pretend that this is millions of, I don't know, pounds sterling from around turn of the century, not the 20th century, but the one before there. That makes so that this is in thousands. Yeah, it's not important. It's just game money. But those are A tier, and if there's a B tier, then we can be in it. We can be in that B tier with Japan, with the US, Austria, and you can see Spain lagging behind already. They don't have a very strong economy at this point. And this is Spain and Austria, Hungary, and others. The small ones get a little bit more money than they had historically. So had this been a sort of an historical setting, Britain would have had even more, lots more. But probably everyone else would have even less. What's funny is also the fleet tonnage. You can see the US, they don't have a fleet. It's 1/10 of the British fleet. They have 1/3 of the budget, but 1/10 of the fleet. So try making a super large game with the US in 1890, and you have very many ships. I mean, we have twice as many ships, and our fleet is tiny. We're gonna look at the fleet. So, tech level is average, or tech development. That won't last very long because it's only average because no one has developed sort of anything from beyond the starting point. Everyone starts the same, although I am pretty sure that in 1890 Britain was like up here, Spain down here, everyone else sort of somewhere in the middle, but it's not important. It's an assumption sort of the game makes. It is fine because this sorts itself out pretty quickly. Soon, Germany, Great Britain, and the US will be very advanced, and everyone else will be various degrees of behind, or well, behind is a category, but behind the three leading nations. So three leading nations technologically, then you have sort of Japan and France maybe, and the rest would tend to lag further and further behind. Japan, although they have an okay economy, they are not technologically in the top tier, so they will never get there. Same with France, they can have a strong economy if you're the player, but they probably won't be as technologically advanced, and that's okay. You don't have to have the latest techs to be competitive. Okay, you can also you can click at France, for example, and you can see the same summary of this is the starting screen. So research, everything is basic. They haven't researched anything, what guns they have, but not what quality guns, just caliber. And then you have base resources, that's from your home country. Possessions, that's your colony. So for France, that's 1/10 of their budget. For the UK, that seems to make up more than 1/3, but that's not strictly true because big possessions like British Columbia, well, Canada isn't even in the game. I'm not sure why. That's weird. That should definitely be rectified. But India, for example, has a value of 40. That translates into X resources. But my point is, you can never conquer these countries. You can only conquer sort of colonies. So yeah, New Zealand is just 10 points. So that could be also Eastern Australia. Western Australia you could never take. Not South Africa, not India. Ceylon you could do, but you could even do Ireland. But the game choices, but just be aware of it. So you can never sort of take away the whole British Empire, no matter how hard you try. So although it seems that these harsh peace treaties will unfairly impact Great Britain. That's not strictly the case. You see, it's not a one-to-one of possession that's worth 40 points on the strategic map generates way more. If you say 40 times 12 months, maybe times some sort of budget modifier, I'm not sure. It's not important. Anyway, France, their bonus text and so forth. But this dock size, you probably want to keep an eye on. And you can also go here to see their base resources and sort of what kind of interesting research they have. This can lie to you. Not the dock size, I think, but unless you turn up your intelligence, these could all be lies. And then you have ships and so forth. A more detailed overview of ships you can see here. Type, ship name, ship class, figure of build. That's basically when they are going to go into service or when they went into service. So yeah, you can see this is an estimation, and of course all starting ships are just listed as 1889. Presumably some were built a few years prior to this. That's not important in this context. You can see where they are, and you can see the summary of their tonnage, their speed. Guns 3 times 14 means they have 3 14-inch guns, and then they have a secondary battery of 12 5-inch guns, and they also have 6 torpedo tubes. You can double click or right click and left click data, and then you get an image of what is truly hideous ship. But that's what they look like at this time. This is an ironclad battleship. It has 3 huge but primitive guns. 14-inch guns, I don't even have those. And weirdly enough, neither does the French. So again, this could all be a lie. They probably have 13-inch guns, or the AI cheated and generating ships. I mean, it's a computer game and there are parameters, and the design process is very complex. So I have no problem with some AI designs somewhat twisting the rules that you as a player have to abide by. That's very, very minor. It's not a thing. But you can see, I mean, we know so very little about this ship. We only know the belt armor that even for this time is very thick. And the reason it's so thick is because this is compound armor and it sucks. Armor-piercing shells, especially a few years from now, once they get hard caps and that sort of thing, they will just touch straight through. Wow, that's an exaggeration, but these 16 inches, if it's truly 16, more likely 12 or 14, it's not going to hold up for very long. Also, its firepower will be atrocious, whether it has 13 or 14-inch guns. They will fire so incredibly slowly, not very far, and extremely inaccurately. This is the secondary battery, usually in casemates, so that is sticking out from the upper part of the hull of the ship. They're not in turrets or mounts. They are sort of almost a throwback to the old days of wooden warships. Imagine ships of the line. Imagine Trafalgar. Imagine Nelson on Victory. He would have recognized a casemate gun for what it was. He probably would have taken those turrets for carronades or something, since they were big and mounted topside, but no matter. Casemates he would have recognized as gun ports. And then you have a tertiary battery of 12 2-inch, aka 50 something millimeters. Around 2-inch in the game doesn't need to be 2-inch, it could be 2.1 or 1.9, and a 5-inch gun could be 5.2 or 4.7, whatever. It's an approximation. Yeah. And again, the list of sunk ships. So this sunk ship, it's just a combination of every nation's sunk ship, so you don't have to sit and click. So that's basically the almanac. It's very useful, and yeah, ships per nation, per class. These are battleships, building, and total tonnage of that class. So all this summed up is this number. But if we can draw some conclusions here, is that our economy is not very advanced. We are far behind even Italy, which is not in the top really. It's half that of Britain. So you can see historically here, if you combine these, that's 380. So it doesn't quite match with the bigger budget. And the fleet size is completely off. You combine these two guys, so Russia and France, they match Great Britain, and that's not good. But we have a weak economy. But as players, we know that both Germany will industrialize in the years to come, so they will have a rapidly expanding economy, faster, I think, than everyone but the USA. The USA seems pathetic at this point, but give them 10 years and they will be, yeah, not the worst. Give them 20 years and they will suddenly be top tier. Wait until 1920 and they will both have the biggest economy, more likely than not, and the biggest fleet. And this will just continue. Oops, continue. What happened? I'm not sure. That will happen. Yeah. I completely lost my train of thought there. Just from seeing my desktop. Weird. Yeah. So we are behind. We are behind in money, but that will improve. But from a military point of view, we are behind in tonnage. And we can see this most painfully in battleships. We only have 4 battleships, and that is pathetic. Not as bad as the US, which on super large has a single battleship, but actually they are pretty happy with that because the battleships we have, they suck. But so does everyone else's, so it sort of evens out. But we don't have very many battleships. But you can see the cruiser situation is not so bad. France has a lot of cruisers, Russia has a lot of cruisers, but we have 4 heavy cruisers, CA, or armored cruisers as they are known at this stage. That's the A in CA. If you wondered why it's not CH for heavy cruiser, it's armored cruiser. But L is kind of weird because that is light cruiser, but at the moment they are just referred to as protected cruiser, so that should be CP. So yeah, nomenclature. Yeah, but Spain also has a bunch of cruisers, but we're big on light cruisers for some reason. We have a bunch, but you can see from the total tonnage, those light cruisers are light, so they are not going to stand up in battle in any way. So. But our cruisers are comparable to other nations. So Great Britain makes sense. They have a big battle fleet, but they also have a bunch of cruisers because they have so many colonial commitments. KE, that's corvettes, or they are not really corvettes. They shouldn't really be called that, but it's a catch-all for every other kind of ships, minesweepers, from big minesweepers to trawlers to all sorts. To real corvettes, you can sort of make real tiny little anti-submarine corvettes to patrol your sea zones. So that's a catch-all for. And you can have sort of like colonial cruisers that are dedicated only to maintaining a naval presence in your colonies. Subs. Airships and aircraft, we don't have any of those yet, but that will come. And there are no carriers and no dreadnoughts, so those categories are not visible until they become relevant. That's the almanac. So, where to start? I will first very quickly show you a little bit about these buttons here. The design ship button takes us to the dialog box where we make our ships. You can either make from the bottom up, or you can just select a pre-dreadnought battleship and click this auto design. And yeah, it's a 12,000 tonner with 8-inch guns. That sounds completely horrendous, so we want 12-inch guns, but we don't have them. So we settle on 11-inch, and then we don't have the tonnage, but we cannot build it any bigger. Then we don't like the look of it, so we want to change it around, and we want more torpedoes. I'm just going through it very quickly, but this is a screen that we will be using a lot to redesign, refit, and make new ship types. So every time new key technologies come around or a ship gets old and could use an upgrade, we will go here. This is where you build ships from existing types. We'll get to that. Here you can build forts and bases. That's not so interesting. This is the preferences screen. You have some auto assign. You can use English rank names instead of Kapitan Zurse and Fregattenkapitan or Großadmiral. Then you can use Rear Admiral and Captain and Junior Grade Captain or in Commander, because that's easier for most people to read. A bunch of other settings, and you have some visual settings. We can talk more about them later. We can't spend an hour talking about these menus. It would be very boring. So this is a history graph, obviously empty. It's just a shortcut listing, not very interesting. And you can put all your ships into what's called reserve. Yeah, you have active ships. They are fully manned and sailing the high seas potentially, and you have reserved ships, which are, yeah, they are basically mostly spending time in port and aren't an active part of the fleet, but haven't been mothballed. And then you can mothball ships, and you can send them to the scrapper. Mobilization, you use that to sort of immediately try to bring all your reserve and mothball ships up to speed. So a sudden war is thrust upon you. There are no messages because we haven't played anything yet. Doctrine screen has some choices regarding special options. We can talk more about those later. But you could specialize in one type of warfare. It could be really good with torpedoes or with night fighting. You could give your pilots elite training. You could swap around a mix of armor piercing and high explosive shells. You could run a naval academy, that sort of thing. You also have this button here for research, where you set a percentage for how much you want to use on research, and you decide what research areas you want to prioritize. You can give them between low and high. You cannot stop researching in the field, so low is the lowest you can go and high is the highest you can go. And well, if everyone is high, then not everyone is actually medium, so that doesn't make sense. So the most extreme setting you can do is just put everything to low and then put 1 or 2 fields on high. You get text when you get text, so it's it can have it definitely has an impact, but it doesn't completely change the game. If you put something on low and something on high, you will after some years notice a difference, but it's not going to be light years different. Budget, as a strong economy, you want this as high as possible, but you can never go above 12. And 10 is where the return on your investment starts to taper off. It sort of plateaus. So 11, doesn't give a full percent extra, and 12 less. So yes, 11 is better than 10, and 12 is definitely better than 11, but it's diminishing gains. Yeah. So 10 is fine. I would never put it on less than 10. But if you can afford, you can run it on 12 as well. Yeah. So I think I will continue with looking at our ships, but I will just take a momentary break. So before we start looking at our legacy fleet, that's what it's called, the legacy fleet, the ships you start with, we are going to have a quick look at the map and talk a little bit about the future. Our main area is Northern Europe, Germany, basically the ports around the North Sea here, Wilhelmshaven, Thunder, and Kiel, but also the Baltic, although as we can see, the Soviet Union currently controls both the Baltic states and the ports along the coast, and Finland. So if we can, relatively early in the campaign, we will try to pick a fight with the Russian Empire, knowing that yes, they have a stronger economy than us, and a bigger fleet, but that we would make some good new designs, which we will try to use in a responsible manner in battle. And they are also split between East and West, like we talked about in the previous video, the challenges of Russia, and why I don't think they are very fun to play. So eventually we want the Baltic to be our lake, because that will free up our back from sudden Russian/Soviet sneak attacks. If we can get both the Baltic states and eventually Finland, they are hard to take. This is worth 8 points and this is worth 9 points. So we really have to beat up Russia pretty badly to be able to claim these as spoils. But we will see what we can manage. I am in no particular hurry to quarrel with Britain and France. They are our traditional enemies, and that is reflected in the game as well. They have an intense dislike for Germany, and if Germany is very belligerent against one of them, they sometimes will just spontaneously form an alliance, even if they are not super friendly. They will make an alliance to counter German aggression. Very unfair. One thing, after we deal with the Russians, then I think France, unless they are allied with the British, could be a good option, but that is much easier if we can be allied with someone in the Med. Italy, yeah, Austria-Hungary can work too. It's just to get France to sort of split its attention, because it's going to be quite a few years until we can avoid what's called a blockade. Yeah, they have a bunch of... This is what happened during the First World War, and in ruler waves it's very easy. You just have to have a tiny amount of ships more than the enemy, and then you can declare blockade, and it will start to hurt, and unrest will go up, and yeah, it's not good. So war with Russia, expand in the Baltics, that's a long-term project, but eventually we'll get there. Sometimes you also get the opportunity to sort of make a coup in Norway and seize that, and then it helps to have an active fleet in the North Sea area. You could say the same about Iceland, but I've only ever seen the Soviets take Iceland, never seen Germany take Iceland, I think. So, but what about the rest of the world? We have some tiny, relatively worthless colonies in what is called West Africa, which is shared with Britain and France. We also have our presence here is very minor compared to theirs. They have 2 and 4, twice our value. This is 4 alone. 6. They have 3 times our, but in overall West Africa, it's not an important area. Then we have a tiny little 2-point colony here versus South Africa at 25 points. And then we have Tanganyika. Trying to be funny there with a sort of a Japanese twist, but I don't know. I can speak a little German, but I cannot pronounce this. We'll probably try having Google spell it out so I could learn it, but okay. Kenya and Zanzibar, not big possessions. Madagascar and Djibouti, not big, but Britain has India at 40 and Ceylon 8, and all of those are in Indian Ocean. So the Indian Ocean is also a British ocean. Yeah. So unimportant, British. Suez belongs, or Egypt. Whoever controls Egypt controls Suez. We can use Suez as long as we're not very bad terms with the UK. But if we are, they will close the channel, and we have to go around the Horn of Africa because we have, for some reason, a micro colony here in the Bismarck archipelago. That's worth 2. That's in the South Pacific zone, and we have the Marshall Islands. That's a 1-pointer, and that's not even in the South Pacific. It looks like it's sitting in the middle there, but it's actually in the Central Pacific. So I guess we could invade Hawaii from there. Except if we look at invasion ranges, those are denoted by this little circles, so we couldn't quite reach Pearl Harbor yet, but we'll get there. Now, I'm just joking. If we can keep our colonies there, yeah, great. But they are worth nothing, so we will invest nothing in them. Same with Africa. Yeah, if we can grab more colonies by fighting France, for example, or through events, we will take them, but we will not invest heavily in defending or expanding our colonial network. We don't have the strength for that yet. So secure the Baltic, that is priority 1, and maybe pick a fight with France backed by Italy if we can manage. Other than that, keep and expand our colonial empire because that's fun, but it's not that high a priority. But first, what is our main priority? Our zero priority. Our zero priority is looking at our ships. So let's go to ships in service. And I started a handful of games, including a couple today, but then I went back to this one I actually fired up yesterday, late yesterday, so I never got to play with it. So it appealed to me because it had fewer different sorts of ship than most. Usually you get a few more cruiser classes, but this one incredibly had, if you click on the header, this is Excel. So if I click here, it will sort by class. If I click here, it will sort by type. So it incredibly had 13, you can see ships selected up here. 13 of the same class. I don't think I ever saw that. And then there are 2 more Frauenlobs here and 2 more Danzigs under construction. So 30, I'm not sure why it does that. Okay. No, it doesn't want to sort them by class. But the good stuff here, it's easier to keep track of fewer classes. Already we are in the one of the problems, quote unquote, of playing on super large. Gets a lot of ships. So we have a bunch of light cruisers. For some reasons, Germans like light cruisers, and these Hellas, although there are many of them, they are actually pretty useless. They don't have any real weapons, and yeah, they are shit. If we look on it, we can double click. We can open the design too, see if we can do anything with them. This is a summary. It has 6 4-inch guns. That's pathetic. And 6 2-inch guns, that's might as well have an airsoft gun. And you can see the key armor traits here. That's fine. It has some torpedo tubes, and everyone has local fire control now. So they're basically just doing what I did during the Age of Sail and pointing and the gun and praying. Pretty much. I have maybe some range finder equipment, but no. This is weird picture. I don't know what that is. No. But maybe you can add pictures to them. It's never worked. It never worked for me. In Ruler Waves 2, never figured out what it's for. You have this log. It's besides it says 1889 for the ship date, but it's actually laid down in 1887 and is commissioned in 1889, and in January this commander takes over. We can look at commanders. You know, it's quite a bit of work that needs doing before we hit the first turn button. Okay, so the Hela is swift. And actually, when I went into the build to look at it, it appears that the Hela class as a whole has been given sort of a bonus knot. And that can happen as random events when you commission a new ship during gameplay, but I've never noticed it. It could have happened before, but I never noticed it happen when you start up. That was a strange experience, but actually this one has a bonus knot of speed. It's not huge, but being able to outrun or catch your enemies is always fine. I think the Gazelle will mostly be running away because it's so pathetic, but we can see if we can maybe make it a little bit better. I'm not sure why I started with light cruisers, but let's look at the other light cruisers. This one is mostly the same in terms of armor. It's slightly armored. It's slightly slower, but actually the same speed because it doesn't have a bonus. I would much rather this one be 20 knots, to be honest, but yeah. It has 2 8-inch guns, so that is a huge difference, but they are slow firing, and it has 8.6 guns, and it had some 3-inch guns, and the Germans start with some pretty good 3-inch guns, which are, I don't know, maybe even better than other nations' 4-inch guns. So this is actually a pretty good starting ship. It's not super good, but it's not bad either. So the Frauenlob, and we have 4 of them, so that will make a pretty nice little cruiser squadron. And we also have this Victoria Luisa, and it is quite similar, but it's even bigger and more powerful. The main difference is that it has twin 8-inch turrets instead of a single 8-inch. You can see the tonnage difference there, and they are the same speed. So we have 4 of these and 2 of these, so we could sort of combine those into 2 3-ship squadrons. And then I also notice we have 2 guys here with also 4 8-inch and some 6-inch and those 3-inch guns again. So we could either, where did they go? We have 4, 6 cruisers, heavy cruisers total. So those I think we can mix and match them, so we have 2 3 ships that are about equal in power. Then the Frauenlobs can go together in another light cruiser divisions, and then we will have to put these Helas. Yeah. And the last cruiser is this Danzig, and that's basically just a tiny evolution of the Hela. So we have 13 plus 2, 15 pretty worthless light cruisers. And then we have 4 good ones, okay. And then we have 2 pretty weak, I mean, look at the tonnage, 4, 6. This is what, we haven't talked about this one. Yeah, this is weird. It has an 18 knot speed, and not a lot of great guns, but it's miniature. It's 4,600. And now over to these horrid beasts. Look at it. This is a battleship, ironclad battleship, 5,300 tons. It's smaller than our cruisers. It's smaller than one of our light cruisers. It has four 10-inch guns, which when you look more closely, they are open-topped, so they have sort of an armored arc around, but they don't have any roof. Because fighting ranges are expected to be so short, because you can't hit anything beyond sort of your arm. So they expect to just go up to each other, almost like, well, not 1,000 yards, but sort of, well, maybe 1,000 yards is fine. Not very far. Several thousand yards and you're not going to hit anything. So basically flat trajectory, so you don't need any turret armor, because anything that goes over your head will just miss. There are no plunging gunfire at this point, because you can't shoot that far and you cannot possibly hit anything. So yeah, both of these are horrid. They are mostly the same. This one, the smaller one, actually has more guns. Yeah, we can try to make them work, but it's not going to be. It's not going to be easy. Not easy at all. And then finally we have these KIs. KEs. They are classified as corvettes. That means miscellaneous. These two are not so bad because they are classified as C. That means they are rated for colonial service. So that means they are very good for taking care of our colonial commitments, which you can see in the area overview here under FS, foreign station requirements. So in West Africa we need 2,000 tons on station, 3,000 and 2,000. And these are around 25% extra, so these are actually 2,500, which is wasted, since we either need 2,000 or 3,000. But we can also use our light cruisers are great for this. But you can see that we have a heavy cruiser in West Africa. We have a light cruiser in the Indian Ocean, and we have a light cruiser in Southern Africa. So I will probably pull back all but one of those cruisers and send out these colonial cruisers. I think that's what people usually call them, and we can call them that as, well, it's basically, they are, you can see the price here. This Harta cost 84. But I could also do it for 25 with this colonial cruiser, the Delphine. So it makes sense. And also, if there is war or you need your ships closer to home, you don't have to spend 3 months waiting for your ships to get back home. Yeah, so I've had a big think and consider the existing fleet and our technology, or rather lack of technology. So I've figured that we need to up our cruiser game. Battleships at this stage are not good, so you might as well build something, a cruiser that's basically the closest you're going to get to a battleship. So I present to you the CA Fürst Bismarck, and you'll note that I have I like to prefix my ship designs with sort of a letter coding kind of derived from from the standard coding system invented by the American many years after this. It's a useful way of keeping track of everything, especially when fleet sizes get a little bit larger. So if you look to the left here, you can see that I have, using my immense Notepad++ search and replace skills, I've opened a game file and added a prefix to every existing ship and ship class. So that B is, of course, for these battleships, these ironclads. Maybe I should have used BI for ironclad or something, but that's too late now. And then I have CA, and that's what I'm calling first class cruisers, those that actually can stand up in a fight. And then I'm using CB. I guess those are kind of like a second-rate cruiser, but I'm also going to try to refit them into something that can support our shitty battleships. And we have CLs for the useful light cruisers, those with like 5,000 ton displacement. And I have used this CS for the lighter cruisers, the Hellas and the Leipzigs that are under construction. I don't want to click here because then that could be a thing. If you are designing something and then click outside the image, it disappears. And you think it's closed, but it's not. It's just hidden behind this window, so you can sort of minimize this and get it back. So don't panic. I didn't understand that at first, but it's a weird one, but that's how it works. And for my auxiliary, when I get destroyers, we'll come up with some naming for them as well. DT for torpedo boats, those small destroyers, and DD for the bigger ones, and DG when they get missiles, that sort of thing. And I have lumped all the KE classes down at the bottom, but I have made an X so they come at the bottom when I sort by class. So XC, those are my colonial cruisers. And the M, I guess, is for miscellaneous. So that's my miscellaneous 1200 and 900 point ship that don't really do anything. But okay. So I had a look. And I went to Armored Cruiser and I hit auto design until I had a sort of visually pleasing layout. And then I adjusted what I felt needed adjusting. So freeboard, well, it's 12,000. I'm building it at home, not because I don't trust a computer not to go to war to me, but you can build ships in other shipyards. This was very common in the period. For example, Imperial Japan, many of its early ships were actually built in England, and they learned a lot from that. And actually in this game, if you build a ship in a foreign port, you can actually get a little tech boost. Sometimes you get a tech boost event that contributes to one of your research fields. So if I were to build it in Great Britain, I could get a research boost. The downside is that if you end up going to war with them, they will basically seize your ships and take them for their own, so then your investment will be wasted. We will try very hard to avoid that, and I am pretty sure we could build like a 15,000 ton cruiser, but it sounds kind of excessive for the time period. Or maybe not excessive, but a little bit gamey. I mean, even a 12,000 ton cruiser when all I have is a 7,000 ton cruiser is a little bit sort of paradigm shift, if you're, well. But the Kaiser is too proud to build ships in English ports, and also French ports, and these have smaller than me. Yeah, so Italy, I suppose, would be fine, but I mean, let's be honest, there's nothing the Italians can do that we cannot do. But besides, I think a 12,000 ton cruiser for our first batch should be sufficient. Then we can have the joy of when we have built up our dockyards to 15,000, we can design a new cruiser. That's sort of part of the fun of the game. Yeah, freeboard is either low, and that's just for Austria, Hungary, maybe something for the Baltic. Anywhere where you can get a little bit of weather, it's very bad, but you can see the appeal here. A low freeboard gives me 600 extra tons to play with. That is huge. So if I'm willing to have my ship founder in bad weather, I can definitely go for freeboard. Now, for Germany, yeah, I mean, I think these battleships actually start with low freeboard, so they can plod around in the channel in the summer and in the Baltic, but I wouldn't take them to the high seas. I think they also have short range. Speed 20 is good for a cruiser at this time. If you see we dial it up to 21, that requires almost 800 tons, or yeah, 800 tons. If I go down to 19, I get 600 back. So it's a steepening curve. So I think 20 for the time period, that's a relatively fast cruiser. It's not super fast, but it's definitely not slow, so it will serve us right. Range, long is on an extreme are relatively useless and definitely out of the question at this point. We're not going anywhere but North Atlantic, so medium is fine. We are relatively close to our bases. Short will limit us to just the North Sea and the Baltic during wartime, but you can again see it frees up a lot of tonnage. So if you are Austria-Hungary, early in the game especially, if you go low and short and decide only to fight that in the summer in the Mediterranean, you suddenly have, you can make your ships much smaller and cheaper, but still pack a punch, or you could just make them more powerful here. But our cruisers may have to cruise, so they will be medium. Then you have engine priority, which affects how often you break down, and these vertical VTE, vertical triple expansion steam, that's steam they are generating, but it's not modern turbines or anything. It's an older concept. They are not reliable. They are coal-fired and no. So basically, with reliable, if you run them at 18 knots or below, they are usually fine. If you run them at max or have less than reliable, or even worse, you have speedy engines and run them at max speed, you are going to have worn out, those guys who are shuffling the coal, and the engines will break down and it will be very bad. Belt armor, I'm guessing most of you are familiar with this, but we can go through it. I was a little bit confused about how the game did it. But belt armor, that is a little bit below the waterline and above, some distance above the waterline, to protect the ship from penetrating hits that could cause flooding, but also specifically to protect the important spaces, machine rooms, boilers, ammunition storage, and so forth. You have belt coverage, you have normal, that's normal, or you could go narrow, which I have done in this case. This creates a sort of, well, I guess the distance beneath the water is about the same, not much difference, maybe a little bit shorter, but the height above the waterline will be somewhat reduced, so you have an increased section above the belt that is vulnerable to damage. But this is where the upper belt comes in. So, So I save a little bit on belt coverage, but I will cover it with upper belt instead. My hope is that also I will keep water out of my belt area, which will keep my ship afloat. And that it is more important to have a more narrow but more powerful belt rather than a wide, taller belt that's not as good. Then you have something called belt extended that many players, I think, will usually armor a little bit less. It's basically extends the belt a bit forward and a bit backward. Yeah, it protects a variety of critical components, including your rudder, becomes less vulnerable if you have belt extended, but also there are other areas of the ship that are better protected. So you could go 0 on belt extended and just, yeah, it's not so big an area, and usually we are fine, or you could do like me and invest just as much in belt extended as belt. So yeah, belt is over 1,000 ton, belt extended is about 300, and then I have upper belt, which is basically the area between the top of my belt and sort of the deck of the ship. It doesn't contain a lot of super important stuff, but it's worth armoring somewhat all the same. Also, you can get in later refits. I'm not sure if it's relevant for exactly this kind of ship. Then you can get rid of that upper belt during refits. You cannot affect your belt or belt extended or deck extended, but upper belt you can reduce. Okay, deck is the deck armor, not necessarily where people are standing. That could just be a wooden sort of floor with some beams supporting it, thin sheet metal underneath, teak planks on top. Now this deck is usually further down in the ship and is found sort of above the important spaces, the machine rooms and all of that. There is actually some good illustrations in the manual regarding how armor is laid out. So deck becomes very important later, but in this first area, deck is not important because you're shooting at each other at a range of a few thousand yards, and everything is coming flat in and hitting directly into the side of the ship. The only things that could sort of penetrate the deck is hits to, well, the superstructure that causes some form of explosion, splinter damage that could sort of strike down and into your ship. So a 1-inch deck is very weak for even a cruiser, let alone a battleship, but I think that for the time period we should mostly be fine. The conning tower is a weird one. It's basically a big metal cylinder that sticks out of the ship. It's not a bridge. The bridge of a ship is usually not armored in any way. Well, maybe against machine gun fire or something like that, but there are plenty of glass windows anyway, so it's not bulletproof even, let alone cannot resist the hit from even a small gun. Even a 2 or 3 inch could do damage to the bridge. The conning tower is sort of a backup command station where the captain can, or his second in command, could direct the battle. And this is better protected than the bridge. This is heavily armored. This can be super heavily armored. It's going to be sort of the heaviest of shells. It's not super heavy. You can see it's on for 6 armor. It's only 128 because it's sort of a little cylinder. Between us, I'm a bit divided on conning towers. Maybe you could either go completely without and just, I mean, sometimes your captain isn't even in the conning tower. He's on the bridge and the bridge gets hit and he dies, but the conning tower remains. But the conning tower does get hit from time to time, and then having a little bit of armor, at least splinter protection, at least 2 inches would be nice. But then it's hit by some small caliber guns, and then it feels kind of stupid to have a critical hit there that sends your ship out of line, and it's uncontrollable for a little while. And if you lose both the bridge and the conning tower, I think you're completely screwed over. It kind of makes sense to armor it a little bit. If I put it at 10, then you see my tonnage go into the red. That would actually be ideal. But I think that for all but the closest distances, yeah, you can. I'm jumping about a bit. My main gun is a 7-inch gun. You can see my penetration at ranges here. You can see that even at 1,000 yards currently, it's just, I can only penetrate a little over 4 inches. So my heaviest gun could not penetrate my belt. It could barely penetrate my upper belt, where there's nothing important. The deck, it has no chance of doing damage to the deck because it's firing flat. It cannot in any way penetrate the conning tower or my turrets, turret top, but that is now splinter proof. My secondary guns are not really armored, they just have a sort of a gun shield that people can huddle behind. That's what this 1 inch is. If I upped it to 3 inches, you see my graphics change, but my tonnage go to hell. So, yeah, they will have to do with the gun shields. So that's my armor layout. So I'm using quite a bit of armor, 19% armor. Here are some armor schemes, but I don't have anyone to really choose from right now. I think it's not ideal. I would have liked a conning tower of 10 and 7 on the turrets and 3 on the turret tops and 2 on the secondaries and 6-inch belt, and yeah, you get it. But then I need a 15,000 ton cruiser, and then I should have more and more powerful guns. Yeah. For this playthrough, I am decided that for me to design a ship, it must look reasonable, like you could sort of fit all the guns and equipment on it visually, which I think I can with this one. And yeah, also try not to be too meta, sort of just stick as many guns on something as you humanly can, but try to have some fun with the builder while also building effective ships, because they are definitely in the mood for building some effective ships. If you fool around too much with your battleships doing ineffectual stuff, you are suddenly going to meet an enemy battle line full of 17-inch 9-gun dreadnoughts, and suddenly your the fun times are over, let's say. So basically the design philosophies here are local fire control only. You can only hit stuff at a few thousand yards, and even rarely at that. So it's better to have many guns, not so high caliber, and just drive up to the enemy and just pummel his superstructure into oblivion. I have a main battery of 7-inch. That is pretty low for a cruiser, and maybe it's not even legal when I think about it. Yeah, it was okay for this period. I was maybe uncertain if I needed at least 8-inch, since this is a so-called heavy cruiser or armored cruiser, but it was fine. So I have these 2 turrets fore and aft, but I also have 2 turrets on either side here, so I can make 8 guns broadsides of 7 inches, shoot out to 9,000 yards. I cannot penetrate anything serious, so I just trying to hit unprotected areas. Many ships don't have belt extended or upper belt, or just generally wreck the unarmored superstructure, blow away secondary guns, that sort of thing. I have a whole host of... I really like the 6-inch, but I felt that it was rather gamey to have both the heavy 7-inch armament and then pile on with the 6 inches. So I went with 7.5, and those are in single mounts because at this point, if you put them in doubles, you totally can. Then you have a 40% rate of fire penalty. So I could put 24 guns in double turrets and have about the same rate of fire as I do with these 14 now. And it would of course weigh a lot more. 24 guns weigh a lot more, and yeah, not really ideal. We can do that later. Later we can make some good cruisers that have 8-inch main armament, 6-inch secondaries, and maybe still, like you can see here, 3-inch tertiary guns. Those are the little ones. So I actually pretty pleased with this design. I haven't made it, so you can see there are tons of 3 inches in the superstructure, and this is not unusual for this time period. And the number 18, that is high, but I have these pre-generated guys have 10, 12 3 inches, so it's definitely not out of the question, and it is within the parameters of the game. Also 14 secondaries, 5-inch. That is also not unheard of. There are plenty of... Yeah, these Victoria Luises have 6 inches, for example, and 8 inches. So this will fire more. But more importantly, yeah, these tertiaries are to protect against smaller ships. They have an ungodly rate of fire, and there are a lot of them. So they don't do a whole lot of damage, but if you're going to talk DPS, I think they are pretty decent. They don't penetrate any armor at all. But once destroyers start appearing in a few years, I think the 3-inch +1 quality, not a 3-inch regular, but Germans start with the 3-inch one. So basically that is 4-inch-ish good, but for much less weight and has a higher rate of fire. Speaking of rate of fire, rounds per gun, it's not super high, but they don't fire so fast in this day and age. The 130 on the mains, 160 on the 5 inches, and 200 on the 3 inches is definitely more than enough. But you can bring those down, or I've chosen to go for sort of not the Victorian look, but the pre-dreadnought. Großadmiral von Heck is a visionary. So he's set about to transform the German Navy and bring it into the modern age. Is basically the German Fisher from Great Britain. Yeah, so I think I was able to fit the graphics in here. It's relatively aesthetically pleasing. I took away some boats. I don't really fancy cranes and boats. Yeah, but this could work. It also sort of a throwback to older times with broadside guns. You can see these are the 5-inch secondaries, very lightly armored. These tertiaries aren't armored at all. If you want, you can always put tertiaries as casemates to make them disappear, or just not have clear graphics and just not have them appear. But I prefer to make ships that look like they could perhaps have these guns in these locations. Yeah, I have 53 tons left over, so that's fine. I have a decent broadside with decent guns, and for the time it is well armored against small calibers. against the big guns, yeah, they could get the lucky penetrating hits, but those 13-inch turrets that fire like once per battle takes a ton of time to reload, and they're not super accurate. So the role of this ship is just to roll up to any opposing ship and just wreck it with tons of fire. Blow up that superstructure and burn it down. Maybe get some penetrating hits, but that's not the main ideal. And once it begins to slow or, yeah, loses steering or something, we have 4 torpedo tubes to either side. It's very narrow, but if you are close and your enemy has been damaged and slowed, then these torpedoes can completely and utterly wreck contemporary warships. The ships of this day have no defense against torpedoes, really. So, but overall, I am rather pleased with this, and aesthetically okay. I'm not very great at drawing these line drawings, so I've used the AI to sort of give me the first. But okay, let's we can check here. Yeah, because I have small guns, they have a reduction in rate of fire, but that will go away relatively quickly. So a minor refit should get rid of that penalty. And these have no penalty, so pretty quick firing. 20% is not as bad as 40. So when you're done, you can press save and finish, and you get this warning again, and you can press OK. Do you want to start developing the design? Yeah, you have to pay an upfront cost to the ship designers, go and start to make line drawings. Engineers, they're calculating stuff. And in 3 months, the design will be ready to put into production, and then it would take a couple of years before the first hull hits the water, so we have no time to lose, really. So let's press yes here. Now you can see my funds here. Since this is a big game, we actually have some funds, and I think we were relatively fortunate to have that much. Yes. And now we can see under construction here that we have a design study, and we can sort by months left, 3 months left. There is also 7 months until our first light cruiser comes off the line, then 10 months for another one, 11 and 12 for the heavy cruisers. And you can see what they cost here per month. You can accelerate the construction, goes a little bit faster at much higher cost. You can also hold construction, and you pay a little bit of a premium, but you can definitely do that if you suddenly run out of money because of war or events or other things. One thing we absolutely should do is to hit build here. We will expand our docks at this stage. It is usually 1,000 extra tons per build, so in 1 year our dock size will be 13,000, and we can design bigger cruisers or even possibly a little battleship, a pre-dreadnought battleship that will serve us a lot better than these hilarious 5,300 ton rubber ducks with guns. So that was our first new design. We will definitely design a new light cruiser as something along the same line. It will probably be a relatively big sort of battle light cruiser that can actually run up to people and blow them up out of the water. These are 5,400 and 5,400. So in that area, up to 6,000 maybe. Not so. It can be a good complement to our new class here. But I will have a little think about that, and then I will get around to maybe looking at some refits to make our existing fleet more effective without wasting a ton of money until we can get our new ships in the water. I mean, we're starting the design process, and then it will take years before we have any number of these new ships. I think by 1895 we will have a sizable number of good modern ships that could actually fight and win. But in the meantime, we could also invest something in making some of our ships more competitive. Swap their armament, nothing major, nothing that will take years and cost us a pretty penny, because then we might as well buy new stuff. And we must also consider when are we scrapping things, and especially these 4 caps lock are very scrappable. They are useless, but we can't scrap them now, because what happens if we get into a war? Then we will be blockaded to that. And also the Kaiser could suddenly pop by our office and declare that why we have the least battleships. That is true, even if we have 4, and you lose prestige, or he would demand that you build 100 new battleships. So there is that to consider as well, but I will have another think.